The boundless expanse of space cradled countless civilizations, each boasting its own strengths, technologies, and philosophies. At the pinnacle stood the Galactic Concord, a coalition of the universe's most advanced species, priding itself on cataloguing every known race. They had conquered or assimilated innumerable worlds, their fleets sweeping across the void like relentless storms. Then they encountered humanity. Initially, humans appeared as nothing more than another anomaly to classify, a brash, young civilization that had clawed its way into the stars using primitive chemical rockets, later advancing to fusion-powered vessels. Their ships lacked the sleekness of the Kari, the organic marvels of the Var, and the psionic mastery of the Eldrin, yet there was something unsettling about Terran warships that the Concord's analysts could not explain. The first meeting was with the hegemony of Trinax, a species revered for its impeccable data acquisition. Confident in their ability to scan any vessel, they dispatched deep space scanners toward the TNS Dauntless. What they discovered shattered certainty. Externally, the ship was unremarkable, advanced alloys, standard shielding, but deeper scans yielded chaos. Data fluctuated. One moment the core registered as a fusion reactor, the next as an antimatter drive. Weapons systems flickered between railguns, energy cannons, and unidentifiable constructs. Worse, certain sectors of the ship consumed all signals, creating black voids in the scan. Then, Trinax's scanners failed, not just those on the ship, but across their entire intelligence network. Operators collapsed, screaming as implants overloaded. Some died instantly. Others clawed at their faces, whispering about the voices inside the code. It took weeks to restore their systems. When they did, the Trinax issued a ban: never attempt to scan a human ship again. The Concord dismissed it until it happened again and again. The Salary, masters of organic technology, sent living probes to investigate a Terran dreadnought. Their tendrils withered and died on contact. The Eldrin, galaxy's finest telepaths, tried to psychically read a human battlecruiser. They returned broken, minds shattered, muttering of the screaming void. Even the prophetic Jari, capable of seeing countless futures, found their visions reduced to static when trying to foresee a battle involving Terran ships. They glimpsed only death, sometimes before the first shot was even fired. The Concord's ruling council, desperate for answers, ordered a massive expedition. A fleet equipped with the most sophisticated scanners ever devised surrounded the TNS Harbinger. Nothing returned. No distress signals, no debris, no explanation, only silence. The decree followed swiftly. No species shall attempt to scan a Terran vessel ever again. The Concord tried to bury the terror, but rumors spread, fragmented logs, hushed speculation. Some proposed humanity had achieved quantum encryption so potent it warped perception itself. Others theorized exotic matter shielding. But the most chilling explanation came from the surviving Eldrin. Terran ships were not just machines. They were aware. Dismissed by many, this theory lingered among those who had faced humanity's vessels firsthand. There was something about how Terran ships moved, anticipating threats, reacting like living predators. The reckless Var decided to uncover the truth. Warriors first, scientists second. The Var assembled a fleet, the largest ever launched, targeting a Terran stronghold. Defended by a single battleship, the TNS Oblivion, logic dictated an easy victory. They outnumbered it 100 to 1, armed with the galaxy's most devastating weaponry. Reality said otherwise. The Oblivion moved like nothing they had seen, weaving through space, dodging fire before it was even launched. VAR targeting systems failed, locking onto empty space or friendly ships. Communications crumbled, Admiralty commands returned twisted, voices whispering, "Run," or worse, echoing with voided silence. Then the screaming began, from within the VAR ships themselves. No Terran weapon fired, no enemy touched them, and yet Crews collapsed in agony, minds unraveling from something unseen, intangible. One VAR captain managed to send a final transmission. Before his vessel was consumed, "The ship is looking at me." When the battle ended, only the oblivion remained. No wreckage, no survivors, no answers. The mighty VAR fleet was erased as if it had never existed. From that day on, the VAR spoke of it only in hushed, fearful tones. No records were kept. The event faded into legend, a whisper among warriors and scholars who dared to question what truly lay within a Terran warship. One truth endured: even the bravest, the strongest, and the wisest refused to ever scan a human vessel again. And beneath that fear, something darker still began to grow. It was a warning, a silent decree etched into the minds of all who had dared seek answers and paid the price. Entire civilizations had learned to avert their senses at the sight of a Terran vessel, treating them as cosmic anomalies best left undisturbed. And yet, there were always those who refused to listen. The Zelnari, ancient and arrogant, considered themselves the pinnacle of intelligence. Their race had mastered reality-warping technologies, bending time and space to their will. Their minds operated on a level so advanced they viewed most species as mere children fumbling in the dark. They had no fear of the so-called conquered species. To the Zelnari, fear was the symptom of a lesser mind. Where others saw danger, they saw opportunity. So when legends of human warships reached them, they did not hesitate. They had never encountered humanity directly, never faced them in diplomacy or war. To them, Terrans were a primitive race who had stumbled upon something remarkable, something they had no right to wield. The Zelnari believed whatever technology empowered human warships could be stolen, studied, and understood. Thus, Project Eclipse was born. The High Council dispatched a single, ultra-advanced research vessel, cloaked in the guise of neutrality. It bore no weapons, only the most powerful scanning equipment ever devised, capable of breaking through any defense, any deception. It could peer into the fabric of reality itself. Their target, the TNS Eclipse, a Terran dreadnought patrolling the outskirts of human-controlled space. The Zelnari ship kept its distance, careful not to provoke. It transmitted no signal, made no aggressive move. It merely observed. At first, all seemed normal. Their instruments captured typical readings: hull, composition, heat signatures, gravitational distortions. But when they activated their deep-core scanners, everything changed. The Eclipse turned, not in evasive maneuvers, not to change course. It turned to face them. There was no conceivable way the human crew could have detected the scan. The Zelnari's technology operated outside the normal dimensions of perception. Yet the moment their scanners engaged, the Terran ship saw them. A heavy, primal silence fell over the research team. Every Zelnari aboard felt something they hadn't experienced in millennia: dread. The lead scientist, a being who had mapped the veins of time itself, hesitated, his hands frozen above the controls. He could not name the feeling gripping him, but it rooted him in place. Then the ship's systems began to fail. One by one, their instruments flickered and died, their scanners, their shields, even their life support. Everything went dark. Panic spread as the crew scrambled to diagnose the failure, but there was no malfunction, no attack. Something was inside their ship. Not a physical entity, not a cybernetic intrusion. Something watching. The lead scientist gasped as his vision blurred. He was no longer aboard his vessel. He was somewhere else, a void without end, surrounded by whispering shapes that shifted in and out of reality. Eyes formed and unformed in the dark, gazing at him, not with curiosity, but with judgment. The whispers grew louder, becoming voices. He understood none of their words, but the meaning stabbed through his mind like a blade. "Do not look," the scientist screamed as his consciousness snapped back. He collapsed onto the cold metal floor, gasping for breath. Around him, his crew lay, still, silent, lifeless, their mouths frozen in eternal screams. The Eclipse did not fire a single shot. It simply turned away, as if losing interest. When the derelict Zelnari vessel was eventually found drifting at the edge of space, there were no survivors. The data logs were corrupted beyond recovery. The High Council tried to erase all traces of Project Eclipse, but rumors spread faster than light. Even among the galaxy's most arrogant species, the message was clear. Do not scan Terran warships. Some knowledge was never meant to be known. The incident sent shockwaves through the Galactic. Conquered. If even the Zelnari, masters of time, space, and knowledge, could not comprehend what lay within human ships, then perhaps the truth was better left buried. Fear gave way to silence. Silence gave way to avoidance. For decades, no species dared to scan a Terran vessel. Encounters were brief. Alien ships altered course without a word. The conquered, once eager to catalogue every life form, quietly removed humanity from their records. Yet curiosity is not so easily extinguished. The Dalek were a race of archivists, historians, seekers of forgotten truths. They craved understanding, not conquest. To them, humanity was the most tantalizing mystery the universe had ever known, and so a final attempt was made. A single Dalek scout ship, the Seeker's Gift, was dispatched to shadow a Terran fleet. They did not intend to scan directly. They would simply record movements, analyze energy outputs, discern patterns, nothing more. For weeks, the Seeker's Gift followed in silence. The Terrans gave no sign of noticing, no aggression, no response. It was as if the tiny ship did not exist. Then, one day, the Terran flagship, TNS Omen, came to a dead stop. The rest of the fleet continued, but the Omen remained still, watching, aboard. The Seeker's Gift, tension thickened the air. They had not scanned, they had not provoked. Yet somehow, the Omen had noticed. Captain Kethril, a veteran of countless expeditions, debated retreat. The mission had already succeeded, yet the Dalek were born from curiosity. Against his instincts, Kethril gave the order. One passive scan, minimal, gentle, careful not to disturb whatever might be sleeping inside. The scan began. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then chaos erupted. Every screen went black. The ship buckled violently, as if gripped by an invisible hand. Instruments exploded into showers of sparks. Gravity inverted. Crew members were thrown against the ceiling, and then came the voices, not through the speakers, inside their minds. Not words, memories. Visions of fire and steel, of wars stretching across the stars, of rage so deep it scorched. Worlds into ash. They saw shadows, not cast by light but by something far older, far worse. Captain Kethril fell to his knees, clutching his head as the visions clawed at his sanity. His crew wept, screamed, whispered incoherent things, terrible things. Through the chaos, one message seared itself into their minds, vast and terrible. You were warned. And then silence. Days later, the Seeker's Gift drifted into conquered space, its crew alive, but changed. Kethril never spoke again. His brilliant mind had been hollowed, leaving only a haunted shell behind. The others babbled incoherently, of something waiting in the dark, of warships that were not merely machines, of a force that even the conquerors feared to name. The Dalek. High Council sealed the records. From that day forward, even the most curious, even the most defiant, joined the rest of the galaxy in silent agreement. No one, no matter how wise, how ancient, how advanced, would ever scan a human warship again. Not because they feared humanity, but because they feared what humanity had found. The galaxy fell into an uneasy silence. The truth was never spoken aloud, but it was understood by all. Yet, somewhere in the endless dark, there would always be those foolish enough to ignore the warnings. The Cisari were one such race, Unlike the Zelnari, who sought to control knowledge, or the Dre, who sought to understand it, the Sisari were something else entirely, a species of shadows, smugglers, data thieves, black market warlords. To them, information was currency, and secrets were the most precious treasure of all. They had heard the legends of Terran warships. They had seen the Concorde's silence, the way even the greatest empires refused to speak of what lurked within those hulking vessels. And that silence only made them crave the truth more. In the lawless depths of uncharted space, beyond the reach of treaties and patrols, the Sisari set their trap. A dead system, a falsified distress signal, and a stolen cargo hauler rigged to scan anything that approached. It was a simple plan. Lure a human warship close, activate the scanners the moment it arrived, and transmit the captured data to a hidden relay station before anyone could stop them. Once secured, the warlords would sell it to the highest bidder. Creel commanded the operation. He was no fool. He had heard the stories, but he didn't believe in ghosts, curses, or anything beyond cold, hard reality. Others are weak, he told his crew. They scan human ships and panic, but we will see the truth. The trap was set, the bait was perfect, and the humans came. A single Terran destroyer, the TNS Revenant, emerged from hyperspace, responding to the distress call. It was smaller than the dreadnought spoken of in hushed legends, no monstrous titan of war, but something felt wrong. Even from a distance, Creel sensed it. An itch under his skin, a silent alarm screaming inside his bones. "Scan it," he ordered, shoving the unease aside. His crew hesitated for only a moment before obeying. The scanners flared to life, and then nothing. No alarms, no malfunctions, no catastrophic failures. The ship's instruments functioned perfectly. Creel exhaled in relief. "See? All nonsense. We have the data. Now we—" Then he saw the readings. There was nothing. No heat signatures, no energy output, no matter displacement. It was impossible. A ship could not exist in real space without leaving a trace. Even cloaked vessels warped gravity. Even the most advanced stealth fields could not erase a ship from existence. And yet, according to the scanners, the Revenant was not there. Creel's stomach twisted into a knot as realization crawled up his spine. It had let them scan it. For the first time in galactic history, a human warship had allowed itself to be observed. Not because the Sisari were clever, not because they had outwitted some ancient force, because the Revenant wanted them to. The lights flickered, not on the Revenant, but on their own ship. The hum of the engines stuttered. Creel gripped the console. As the air grew heavy, each breath a struggle like inhaling something wrong. His crew staggered, some collapsed, their bodies convulsing violently. The ship was speaking, not in words, not in code, but in memories. Creel's vision twisted. He was no longer on the bridge, no longer aboard his ship. He stood on a battlefield, under a sky of burning ash, amidst fleets shattered to drifting. Corpses, and the warships, they were not machines. They had never been machines. Something had been left behind after humanity's greatest war, something that should have died, something that had no place in the natural order, and yet endured. It had been given form, engines, guns, hulls of gleaming steel. But at its core, in its bones, it was not a ship, it was a grave, and something inside had never stopped screaming. The vision broke. Creel collapsed, vomiting violently. His body wrung, his mind scraped raw by contact with something it was never meant to comprehend. Desperate, he clawed at the console, trying to shut down the transmission, to wipe the data. Too late. The Revenant moved. Not forward, not back. It flickered. One moment before them, the next, inside their ship. The walls bled data. Screens turned to static. Crew members screamed as their eyes blackened, their bodies locking into grotesque stillness, their voices stripped away. On the console, Creel saw the numbers counting down. Data transmission complete. The information had been sent. To where, he would never know. The Revenant spoke one final time, a whisper not made by any human tongue. Your debt is paid. Then nothing, no ship, no Caesari, no debris, only silence. The message the Caesari had fought so hard to steal, the data they had sacrificed themselves for, was never found. But across the galaxy, in the forgotten systems where ancient warships drifted in empty, nameless graves, some began to wake. The silence that followed was different. Before, species had avoided Terran warships out of fear. Now they avoided them out of understanding. Something ancient had been disturbed, something never meant to be seen. For centuries, the Galactic Concord had believed themselves the rulers of the cosmos. They had mapped the stars, catalogued the species, built empires stretching across hundreds of systems. But there were things in the void that had never been written in their records, because those who tried never returned. The Forgotten War. The pieces were scattered, but now some had begun putting them together. In hidden archives and whispered reports, a different story emerged of humanity's great war, not fought against another empire but against something else. It had been brief. It had been violent. The humans had fought alone. No species had come to their aid. And then, silence. The war ended. The humans survived, and no one ever spoke of what they had survived against. At first, the Concord believed humanity had simply destroyed their enemy so completely that history had erased them. But the truth was so much worse. The whispering ships. After the Caesari incident, something changed. Across the stars, Terran warships began moving in ways that defied logic. They appeared in systems with no record of departure. They drifted through battlefields that no longer existed. Some hovered over ancient ruins, dead for millennia, weapons charged but never firing. And then came the whispers. Cargo pilots, station workers, smugglers in the outer rings, they all reported the same thing. A brief flicker of static over their comms, a burst of noise through their instruments, not a signal, not a message, something else, a voice, not words, not even thoughts, a presence, watching, remembering. Most ignored it. Some panicked, abandoning their ships in terror, but a few, the ones who had fought wars, the ones who had killed and bled before, they understood. It was not a threat. It was a warning, and one by one, the oldest warriors of the galaxy began to leave the front lines. They resigned from their fleets. They knew the dead were waking, and they remembered. They abandoned their titles. Some fled into exile, not because they feared humanity, but because they feared what humanity had locked away, and what would happen if it ever escaped. The Galactic Concord convened in an emergency session. The evidence was undeniable now. The humans had hidden something, a relic of their forgotten war, something that should never have been disturbed. And yet, it had been. The Caesari's stolen transmission had been sent. No one knew where, but someone, somewhere, had received it. And if they opened it, the Concord issued their first sealed order. A command binding all species across every fleet, every empire. No one would scan, track, or research human warships ever again. Any who tried, scientist, soldier, emperor, would be erased. Not by humanity, by their own kind. Because there were things in the dark that even the greatest empires could not fight, and whatever humanity had imprisoned inside those warships was never meant to wake. In a forgotten corner of the galaxy, in a station long abandoned, a single console flickered to life. A signal, a transmission that had taken years to arrive. The final remnants of data stolen by the Caesari, now decrypted. The Screen displayed only one thing: coordinates, far beyond the reach of charted space, where even starlight refused to go. Something opened its eyes. The coordinates led to a place that should not have existed, a sector erased from all maps, a void of absolute darkness. Sensors failed there. Engines stalled. Ships simply disappeared. The conquered had buried all knowledge of it long ago. But now something had called it back. A lone ship drifted toward the coordinates, unmarked, silent. It belonged to no fleet. It carried no insignia, no transponder. It was a Frankenstein's creation, pieced together from stolen parts, hidden from the eyes of governments and warlords alike. Inside, a single figure watched the void grow darker. Vaya. For a decade, she had chased the truth, the fall of the Caesari, the whispers in the void, the ships that should not exist. And all of it had led her here. She knew the legends. She knew the first sealed order, the law the galaxy dared not break. But Vaya didn't care for laws. She cared for knowledge. Her ship trembled as it neared the coordinates. Instruments died. Gravity flickered. The engines refused to push forward. The void itself seemed to resist her presence. Vaya exhaled sharply, reaching for manual controls. And then she saw it. A ship. No, a grave. Massive, vast as a city, yet wrong in ways no blueprint could capture. It drifted with no power, no lights, no movement. And yet Vaya could feel it, a cold pressure at the edges of her mind, scraping against her thoughts like fingernails on bone. Warships were machines. This was not a machine. It was a corpse, and something inside it was still awake. Her hands shaking, Vaya activated the scanner. Just one scan, just enough to pull the data and run. The readings flooded in, and what she saw defied reason. This ship hadn't been built by humans. It had been grown from them, not just from metals and technology, but from their very essence. The walls pulsed faintly, almost breathing. The framework twitched beneath her gaze, then the data corrupted. The words on the screen twisted, breaking into languages no one knew, and then a sound. Not over the comms. Inside her mind, a whisper. Ancient, hollow, you have seen too much. Vaya gasped, staggering backward as her vision shattered. She saw glimpses, worlds burning, ships screaming, the war that was never meant to be remembered, and the terrible mistake humanity had made. The first warships, not weapons of war. Seals, cages, holding something that should never have existed. Humanity hadn't simply won their war. They had buried it, locked it inside metal and flesh, imprisoned behind the hulls of warships, weapons not meant for battle, but for containment. And now, because of her, because of the Caesari, one of them had woken up. Vaya stumbled toward the escape pod. Her ship wasn't failing. It was being devoured. The dreadnought's influence had tasted her, and it hungered for more. She barely made it to the pod before the ship behind her melted, not burned, not destroyed, but unmade. She launched herself into the void as the last fragments of her vessel were swallowed. Before the pod's systems kicked in, she glimpsed it. The dreadnought, once dead, now stirring. Its dark hull throbbed with a sickly light, a heartbeat. It was waking, and the void would never be silent again. Vaya's escape pod tumbled through the darkness, systems flickering, life support failing. She could barely breathe, her mind still screaming with the knowledge she had uncovered. But she had to warn them. With trembling fingers, she activated the pod's weak transmission beacon, a simple message sent across the stars. It is awake. And then silence. The message spread like wildfire. Panic rippled across the galaxy. The conquered scrambled. Fleets were mobilized. Emergency councils convened. The sealed order had been broken, and humanity. They said nothing. No response, no denial, no confirmation. They simply moved. For the first time in centuries, every human warship, every silent relic, changed course. They all converged on one point, the place Vaya had found. Across the galaxy, those who had once feared humanity's ships finally understood. They had never been war machines. They had been prison guards, and now their prisoners were stirring. Vaya never made it back. Her escape pod was found days later, drifting near the conquered border. No damage, no forced entry. She was simply gone. Only her data logs remained, looping the same message over and over, "It is awake." By then, it was already too late. Because, in the deepest corners of the void, something was moving. The lost war had not ended. It had only been sleeping, and now it was time to finish what had been started.